All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're exploring a really provocative theory, one that argues the damage from dictatorships isn't just political or economic, it's much deeper. It's cognitive. The claim here is that authoritarianism can fundamentally damage the very way its citizens think. So let's break this challenging idea down.
You know, the whole argument really kicks off with a puzzle, and it's one you've probably seen play out yourself. A dictatorship falls, or its people manage to escape, but for some reason, the old patterns of behavior, they just seem to stick around. So why does that happen? Well, this explainer unpacks one author's attempt to answer that question, and let me tell you, their answer is pretty startling and definitely controversial. Okay, so to really get a handle on this author's pretty radical theory, we have to start with the obvious stuff first. These are what they call the visible scars. You know, the surface-level behaviors that anyone can look at and see, but that very few people really understand what's going on underneath. So the author paints this really vivid picture of a society where you can't show your true emotions. Fear isn't just something you feel, it's something that's manufactured by the state, and feelings like joy or even sadness, they're basically performed on command. Now, if you're an outsider looking in, this can come across as what the author calls strange temperaments, like this weird, intense agitation about certain political topics. And these are those visible scars we were talking about. They're like masks, right? Masks you have to wear just to survive.
But, and this is a really crucial point, it's kind of the first big twist in this theory, the author says that if we just stop there, if all we do is focus on these behaviors, we're missing the point completely, like 100%. Because these are just the symptoms. The real problem is a much, much deeper hidden wound.
And that brings us right to the heart of the matter. This is what the author calls the unseen impairment. This is their big, radical explanation for why all those visible scars stick around. See, it's not just about how people act, it's about a fundamental breakdown in how they think.
So here's the key distinction the author wants us to make. All those visible things we talked about, the fear, the agitation, the controlled emotions, that's all just surface noise. The real damage, what they call the substantive essence, is way, way deeper. They argue it's two things, a broken belief function and a damaged thinking function.
Okay, so what in the world does thinking function impairment actually mean? Well, the author calls it an institutional pathology, and this part is absolutely key. They're not saying that the people themselves are somehow flawed. No, not at all. They're saying the system, the state itself, causes a kind of functional injury to a person's ability to think and to believe. And that injury is what leads to those predictable, strange behaviors we see on the surface. Right. That is a massive claim to make. So how does the author even begin to back it up? Well, they don't just leave it hanging there as some abstract idea. They actually offer up two specific scenarios as their proof that this impairment is a real thing. So, proof number one is all about history. Think about it. When a dictatorship collapses, it's not like people just magically start embracing open, critical thinking overnight. The author argues that they're often left with, and I'm quoting here, heads filled with superstition. And what happens next? Instead of building something totally new, they often rush to find a new authoritarian master and end up rebuilding a system that looks suspiciously like the one that just crumbled.
And the second proof? Well, it drills down to the individual level. The author claims that when people manage to escape a closed society and get to an open one, they don't just seamlessly integrate. Instead, this cognitive impairment they're talking about actually leads them to try and recreate a small closed system right there in their new environment. It's like they're trying to build familiar, safe walls, even when they're standing in a wide open field.
So we've got the diagnosis, right? This thinking function impairment. And that brings us to what might be the most controversial part of this whole theory. If the diagnosis is correct, then what's the cure? Well, the answer they propose is pretty radical.
Yeah, the author really doesn't pull any punches here. They come out with a really sharp critique of how we currently handle things. They basically argue that immigration policies that are all about just blocking or deporting people are totally missing the mark. Why? Because they do nothing to address the root cause of the problem, that unseen impairment.
So what's their alternative? Well, it's this three-step process that sounds almost medical. First, you have to figure out the specific type of thinking impairment someone has. Second, you have to recognize the unique psychological scars that were left by that authoritarian power. And third, you administer a treatment based on what they call a new science.
And this leads to what is, without a doubt, the most audacious claim in this entire theory. Get this.
The author asserts that with the right, sophisticated treatment plan, all of this deep-seated institutional damage could be resolved, fixed, in less than a month.
Now look, it's really important to point out that the author knows how this sounds. They are fully aware that these ideas are way outside the mainstream. They even acknowledge that in a world that doesn't really believe in general human standards, this whole new science thing is definitely on the fringe, and who knows what will happen with it. And so we're left with this really profound and honestly kind of unsettling final question. This author's theory really forces you to think about a disturbing possibility. If a political system can actually systematically break a person's ability to think, then what does it truly take to heal that? Is it really something you can fix in less than a month? Or is the damage something much, much more permanent? It's a really challenging thought to leave you with.